Hi, this is Simon Moon from Simon Moon Music, and it's part 11 in my series of tutorials on how to produce music with Bitwig Studio. I think, it's been a while, some 2 weeks or so, until since last time I uploaded a tutorial to YouTube. Workload was high, and I played around, admittedly, with Bitwig Studio 2 a lot. There are a couple of interesting new features. One of the most prominent is the new modulator concept. And I would like to talk about this a little today. And in order to show you the basic concepts, I would like to rebuild the noise sweep from our sideturns track. And this is this section here. Let's listen to this real quick. So there is a sidechaining effect going on and a little flutter effect in this first section here, and then a gate effect in this second part. And I would like to rebuild this. Let's listen to the whole thing in context real quick. So the whole idea is to have a transition between the two drops, and there is, some excitement hopefully being built up during the first part of this noise sweep, and in the second part this is being brought down a little bit again. After all, it's a common transition between two drops. So what I would like to do now is I would like to open a new project, because I would like to build the noise sweep as a FM4 preset and then reintegrate it into our track later on. So I open up a new project. I only need an instrument track in here, and we'll use FM4 as a sound generator. Again, why? Because it has a built-in noise generator, and this is what it sounds like. Oh, sorry. What we just heard was the other project, because it has the audio engine activated. If I want to change this, I have to click on Activate Audio Engine here, and now this is what I hear. It's just a noise coming out from FM4, and it doesn't actually matter which note I play, because by definition noise doesn't have a pitch. Unless, of course, maybe interesting to note that if you introduce a very high Q factor, it means that at the cutoff frequency there is a self-resonance taking place, and this is almost like a pitch, but it's actually only the cutoff frequency self-resonating. Okay, so the new modulators. Let's start with something that looks familiar. This is the FM4, the way it looked in Bitwig Studio 1 already. Now, if we click here, you remember the symbol Show Remote Controls. The symbol has been available in Bitwig Studio 1 already, but there is a significant difference now. In Bitwig Studio 1, these were macro controls, and you could assign these to various parameters that were in the same container. Now they are no longer macro controls. This is a very important difference, because Now, since the new modulators are available, if you click on Show Modulators, there's a new column appearing with 3 cells, and each of those has a plus sign. If I click on a plus sign, then I get all the available modulators displayed that I can choose from. And in there are macros. And these have the characteristics of what used to be in that left section. What is in here now has a completely different meaning. The idea is, if I click on this little preference icon here, then you see that there are a number of device pages, and I can change them by clicking on these up and down buttons here as well. And the whole idea is, these device pages are predefined for FM4, and for each of the sections in FM4 there is a device page representing this section. So if I click on the noise on off button, then you see that the change gets reflected up here as well. And the reason is that these are essentially only remote controls. So no matter where I apply this chain, it gets displayed in all of the representations, because this is essentially the same manipulation element, the same knob, the same button over and over again. It's just different views, but they are manipulating the very same objects or object instances in the background. So that's important to understand. And now, in order to have your own remote controls, and you have to click in this little plus sign in here, and then there's another preset page or device page coming up, and this is by default always called Perform. You can rename it to I don't know, let's call it Sweep Performance, whatever. Okay. Now, if I close this, then you see we have a new device page here, and these slots can be assigned to all kinds of buttons and knobs, and to the macros that we can insert here. This is being done by clicking on this Wi-Fi-like icon, and then on any other button, like so. And now, if you tweak this knob, it's tweaking its twin brother at the same time, because this is only a representation of this knob. So I delete this real quick, because what we want to do now is rebuild the noise sweep. And obviously one essential element is the noise output already. I just don't want this to decay over time. Increase attack so that it comes in more softly, and then add a little release tail. Okay, so that's it for this. Let me do another thing. Okay, we only need this second track in here. I will simply add a little MIDI now. Remember, it's noise, it doesn't have a pitch anyways. Now we have 1-bar notes. I simply duplicate them by hitting Ctrl D, at least on a Windows PC, and on a Mac, I don't remember what it's called. It's, don't remember, sorry. The corresponding key to the Windows control key. So remember, the first way of manipulating this noise was the sidechaining effect, and so as a consequence I would like to have something in here that does the same thing. And I noticed that there is a new LFO called Beat LFO, And if you tweak it like this, then you notice that this already looks a lot like a ducking curve that is used for sidechaining effects. There are a couple of commercial tools which do this, some in a more complex manner, but the simple ones are doing basically the very same thing. So now, if I go on Effects here and click on this little plus sign, I can include another effect, audio effect, to this container. If I click on the white plus sign, it's not inside the container and it cannot be reached by the modulators, whatever parameters are in there. But if I use the noise, the audio effects in this effect section here, click on the blue plus sign, and then I can access the parameters inside this tool we've just added. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I am assigning the output. I'm making this unipolar because I want this to go only in one direction. I'm assigning this output to the amplitude to start with. So this is what's happening now. So with the beginning of every quarter note, so if I leave this in a default position, this is representing quarter notes, becomes more slowly as I turn this all the way to the left until it's a whole note, and so on and so on. There is one thing that I would like to do additionally though, is now whenever a kick hits in our track, then this amplitude may not be reduced fully. In order to make sure that it is fully reduced, I nudge this a little to the left, so now it's immediately before the beat. So this is just one little detail which makes sense to do in this situation. And now we have our sidechaining effect already in there. Then the other thing we had was a flutter effect. And in order to have this in, I'm just using one of the classic LFOs. And I want to use the sine wave here. I just have to make sure that I can dial in more and more of the effect over time. And this is being done by using this amount here. So if I increase the amount, then you see how the amplitude of this LFO increases and decreases. So if I assign this to, for example, pan, and also to the amplitude. Sorry, let's make this unipolar as well. Then this is what it sounds like. Oh, okay, I was just not manipulating the amplitude, but I didn't notice. Okay, now that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this LFO to also reduce amplitude. And I think I have to make this effect less pronounced. Okay, so now we have, first of all, our sidechaining effect here, and at the same time we have the the first idea of what I'm calling a flutter effect. I'm just reducing the effect of this to make the other one more audible, just for a second. So now you notice that this is manipulating the panning. and at the same time the amplitude. Okay, so in order to have a knob to bring in these two effects and make them more pronounced over time, I am simply doing the following. I'm having a remote control here assigned to the depth. So this brings in more and more of the sidechaining effect, and then I have another remote control that actually uses the amount here. But since I don't only want to manipulate the amount, but at the same time also the frequency, I'll be doing the following. I will have another modulator, and I'm using a macro now, and this macro will be used to to increase the amount here and to increase the frequency at the same time. So this is what is happening. And maybe another thing, a good idea might be to also make this affect the cutoff frequency here, because you'll hear in a second what it does. So if I increase the Q factor, this is going to start whistling more and more pronouncedly, especially if I reduce the cutoff here. Okay, this is probably a little too much. Now let's listen to this one more time. Okay, so that's already something. Okay, we have our flutter effect and we have our sidechaining effect. So now I'm adding a remote control for this as well, and I just rename this to flutter, and I cannot unfortunately rename this here because this goes directly to the depth here, and I can't rename this knob. It has a default name that is given that is part of the device here, and as a consequence, even if I rename it here to say sidechain amount, then as soon as I tweak it, you see up here it's still called depth, beat LFO depth. And well, maybe Bitwig is going to come up with a clever solution for this, because this way now you have to remember that this button here is referring to this depth knob, and if you want to add an automation in here, then you simply have to remember this connection in order to understand what's going on. Okay, then the third thing we had was our gate effect, and in order to have that in, I add another classic LFO, because if you have a look at this, you see that there is a pulse wave here that I can use for this. And first of all, I have to make this time synced. I want it to be based on 8th notes, and also have this unipolar. And I'm adding, now I'm click on the plus sign again, another tool. And the reason why I'm using another tool is simply because I don't know whether at the moment I will want to do things that interfere with the other effect, and that as a consequence I want this effect to manipulate a completely different instance of the tool here. Plus, as you noticed, I nudged pan to the right in order to compensate for the fact that the this LFO here is unipolar, and if I had this in the middle it would only nudge the sound to the left, but I want this sound to go from left to right. And now I can compensate for that in here a little bit, because here I also want to introduce a pan effect that is based on this LFO. So I turn down, sorry, I turn down flutter first. So I want this to affect the pan position and also the amplitude rather drastically. And now you see why it makes sense to have a second LFO do this, because if I had this assigned to amplitude here, then this would go all across until it's full amplitude again, if it adds up with the effect from the other LFOs. I hope this is somehow makes sense somehow. Okay, now this is our gate effect. And if none of the effects are actually active, then like so, then these two pan positions neutralize each other. Hope you get the idea. Okay, now we got the gate effect. And we could even use the flutter effect additionally without causing any problems on the amplitude here going crazy, because these are different instances of the tool, if you want to call it this way. And then there's the sidechaining here, which can also be combined with steps. There is one thing I would like to change though, and that's since I would like to have a useful name in here, I'm simply removing this remote control real quick, because for the gate effect I would rather have a dedicated macro knob to do the manipulations here and increase the amount to 100%. And I call this gate. And if I add a remote control, now it's basically doing the same thing, but it says gate here, and if I tweak this, it gives me the correct name up here. Okay, so now we have our gate effect, our flutter effect, and the sidechaining effect. Another thing that is useful for these kind of noise sweeps is to be able to combine them with filter sweeps as well. And there's one filter already built into the instrument, and that's a cutoff frequency here. So why not use this already? And in order to do so, I could simply add a remote control here, but then again, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't have the same name up here as I have down here. So as a consequence, I add another set of macros, one for a low-pass filter, which is this one, and a high-pass filter, which we will simply include in here right now. So I'm looking for a filter. I'm narrowing down the search to Bitwig, and here's a filter. So I have to make this a high-pass filter, obviously, bring this all the way down and reduce the Q factor. And now, just for fun and to show you what it does, I'm using the macro 4 here. And now you see 4 macro knobs appearing. And it's just a matter of convenience to be able to combine 4 knobs into one of these slots. Now if I name this one low pass frequency and this one high pass frequency, you can obviously use this to manipulate the cutoff here, and but in order to be able to do so, I bring this all the way down and almost all the way up for being able to manipulate it and later to automate it. And the high pass frequency, the same thing, only that now we are using the cutoff frequency of this other filter. And now I can have these knobs in here, and if I tweak them, then you see now automation lanes, the name is displayed correctly. Okay, now these 2 knobs are at their neutral position, so it means that the whole frequency spectrum can be heard now. And we can use these to automate the frequency cutoff. But before we do this, let's simply do some very basic touch-ups to the sound itself. And the first thing is that I would like to have some reverb as part of the sound, not as some kind of room information. So I reduce build up and pre-delay to nothing. I don't want additional low frequency content to be generated by the reverb, and I want to go more for the late reflections and have the higher frequency content being in there for a longer period of time than the lower frequency content. Okay, so that's basically it. So the difference is subtle. It just makes the sound a bit more smooth. And just for fun, let's see what we can do by adding by adding distortion. Okay, don't know how this happened. Okay, everything seems to be okay, I guess. Yes. Somehow it opened up Native Instruments, one of the Native Instruments synth. Okay, anyways, here's our distortion. Let's see what it sounds like. Some DC bias down in. Just want to have a low noise rumble out of it. So obviously now this distortion prolongs the sound because as the reverb tail goes down and the release ends, so this is the release here, the sound that couldn't be heard beforehand is now audible because it is being distorted. Which is okay, but I still think it makes sense to have only a smaller portion of the wet signal of the distortion in the sound. And another thing I'm thinking of right now is, see, the distortion has a frequency here that is used for pronouncing a specific frequency in the wet signal. You can hear it here. So one thing I would like to do, well, first of all, we have to reduce the reverb tail significantly. So one thing I would like to do is I would like to include this in the frequency sweep of our low-pass filter. So remember, we had that low-pass filter assigned to this macro here. And if I go back to this thing, I bring it to something that sounds okay. And then I use this macro knob to increase the pre-EQ frequency over time. We might end up with something that sounds interesting. So I reduce the Q factor a little bit further because this is just too pronounced now. And the gain. Okay, I think that's okay. Reduce mix level a little bit further. Okay, that's nice. And now to automation. This is the last step that we'll be going through today. First of all, this is our first section here, 4 bars long. I extend this loop section here and copy this over, because in the first part what we want to have is we want to have a sidechaining effect being dialed in slowly until the end of the 4th bar and then being reduced to nothing right afterwards, and also have the flutter effect coming in very, very slowly and then going totally nuts to the end, towards the end. And what else? And then maybe have the high pass going up through this first section, which is going to sound like this. So this is too much, I guess. Should be more frequency content left. Okay. Obviously also the flutter has to end at the beginning of bar 5, and a little thing is I want this to end a little bit sooner. Oh no, it doesn't make sense. Sorry about that. Okay. Then what else is there to be manipulated? Obviously we have the low pass frequency, which should be completely on a neutral position until here, and then I would like to have this go down in the second part because it's like a filter sweep, bringing the excitement a little bit back down. And the last thing, it's the gate here, and during the first section the gate effect is off, and then we bring it in fully in the beginning, and then it's becoming less and less pronounced over time. So let's listen to this real quick. So I guess we should try this. Okay. I guess this is it for today. I think I will save this as a preset to the library so we can reuse this in our track, but I'll do that later. Well, I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. If you did, please subscribe, and I hope to see you in one of the future tutorials. Until then, have a nice day.